Annyeonghaseyo. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar on Korea, titled Recent Developments in Inter-Korea Relations. This is the last webinar of the series, celebrating the Asian Center's 65th anniversary with the theme Asian Center at 65, zealously cultivating ideas and ceaselessly inspiring minds across Asia. We aim to make this webinar series a platform for knowledge exchange among students, faculty, researchers, and other professionals, despite the ongoing public health crisis. So we would like to acknowledge the help and assistance of our colleagues from the UP Computer Center who have been supporting our events and webinars since the start of the pandemic. So this morning, we had a webinar on Korean food together with Dr. Cha, Dr. Amatori of Daegu University, Professor Torres of Keimyung University, and Ms. Villarreal of the Munwa Center. And they gave us a taste of Korean food, bulgogi and kimchi jjigae. They taught us how to do that. So for this afternoon, we shall explore the recent issues and events that transpired between North and South Korea, such as the North Korea's nuclear weapons program, the summit meetings, and the Trump-Kim meetings. So it then seeks to analyze the impact of and effects of these events to the domestic political conditions and international relations between the two countries. So we shall also look at the prospects in the future, especially with the changes in the U.S. administration in this month, last month, sorry. So to start, please welcome the Assistant Dean for Research and Publications of the Asian Center, Professor Michelle Palumbari.
Yes, thank you very much, Danae. Annyeonghaseyo. Good afternoon. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Welcome to this webinar organized by the Asian Center. Thank you for sparing your time just to be with us today. And thank you very much for Professor Shin for being with us today. I am certain that many of you have read recent news about North Korea, South Korea, and the Korean Peninsula in general. I'm sure many of you would like to know more of what's going on in the region. So in this regard, we have invited Professor Shin of Seoul National University to give us a lecture on recent developments in the peninsula. Actually, this will not be the first time for Professor Shin to give a lecture here at the Asian Center. In fact, through the UP Asian Centers and Seoul National University Asia Centers growing partnership, through Korea Foundation, Professor Shin has been in our Korea classes here at the Asian Center, giving numerous lectures on culture and society and politics and governance in Korea. I can say that his lectures, and along with Professor Pyo's lectures on socioeconomic development in Korea, have not only enriched the Korea Studies program of the center, but also deepened the knowledge of many students' Korea and non-Korea majors. So, if you want to know more about Korea in depth, Korea in relation to the Asian region, and Korea in relation to the Philippines, feel free to enroll here at the Asian Center. We will be very happy to have you here. And so, without much further ado, I don't want to keep you waiting. Please welcome Professor Ken Shin, a Distinguished Professor Emeritus in the Department of Sociology, University of South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, and Visiting Research Fellow, Asia Center, Seoul National University. Please welcome Professor Ken Shin. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle, for your kind introduction. And I am deeply honored to be here for this webinar on the occasion of celebrating 60th anniversary of your Asian Center. I would like to share my thoughts on recent development in inter-Korean relations this afternoon. for my talk, I have formulated some preambles. And I will use these preambles as basic postulates for my talk this afternoon on inter-Korean relations. First of all, Koreans consider Korea is a shrimp among gigantic whales. What it represents is the geopolitical factors have impacted Korean Peninsula. And one very compelling incident supporting this notion of geopolitical dynamics of Korean Peninsula is the legacy of Korean War. After the liberation from Japanese colonial rule in 1945, Koreans hoped to have a united nation state, but it did not happen. Korea was divided in two ideologically opposing nations within Korean Peninsula, and in the north, Kim dynasty emerged, and North Korea's political system is like a cult religion. And North Koreans have used brinkmanship in international relations historically. And in both North and South, the domestic political climates have been impacting the inter-Korean relations. And we have this triangular relations which come to play in inter-Korean relations. The triangular relations I'm talking about involves Seoul, Pyongyang, and Washington. So United States is one of the major players in inter-Korean relations. And in my talk, I will have the recent development in North Korea. Then I will discuss recent political development and economic conditions in South Korea. Also, I will touch upon the changing administration in United States and how it's going to influence inter-Korean relations. I will discuss the possible Joe Biden administration's policies toward North Korea. Then I will conclude my presentation with some reflections on these recent development in North and South Korea and United States. Since I have to adjust to new time allowed for my presentation from 2 hours to 1 hour, I have to skip some of the slides. I would say that the major domestic issue in both North and South Korea, perhaps in other countries as well at the current point in time, is the pandemic of the COVID-19. North Korea claimed that there is no COVID-19 cases, 0 cases, but pundits question that claim, and they came up with the estimate, some estimates ranging from 5,000 to 7,000 confirmed cases in North Korea. But North Korean official press release reported that no confirmed cases of coronavirus in North Korea as of today. Okay. And after the outbreak of COVID-19 in China, North Korea decided to close the North Korea-China border. And because of the closing of the border, North Korea has been experiencing a serious food supply problem. Okay. And all the so-called private markets, 장마당, have been closed as well. And in relation to the coronavirus, the South Korean government offered some assistance, but North Korea has refused any offers coming from South Korea thus far. In recent days, just 3-4 days ago, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un banned fishing by North Korean fishermen in the coastal areas. Also, he ordered the lockdown of Pyongyang and neighboring Jagang province. North Korea executed 2 individuals, one with the charge of bringing foreign goods, which was a violation of COVID-19 prevention guideline. The other one who was executed was one of the major money changers in Pyongyang. That money changer must have been dealing with some outsiders, and that led to this execution. On the basis of this intelligence report, we could conclude that there are some kind of resurgence of coronavirus even in North Korea, despite the fact that they claim no confirmed cases at all. And also, North Korean agents attempted to hack one South Korean pharmaceutical company that has been developing COVID-19 vaccine. So they are using all sorts of different angles to get some leading information about vaccine development program. Just several days ago, South Korean president made an offer to supply substantial amount of rice to North Korea to help their food shortage problem, but North Korea declined to accept any rice from South Korean government. One recent information we came across about the missile development by North Korea was the fact that on October 10th, this is a typo, 2020, not 2010, on the occasion of North Korean Military Foundation Day, they displayed this ICBM. This particular ICBM was on 11 axles. The carrier had 11 axles. If you count these wheels, you will see what I'm talking about. In the past, what we have seen was the ICBM carried by 9 axles, most 9 axle vehicles. So this one appears to be a bigger and more powerful ICBM than those displayed in the past by North Korea. After this huge celebration on October 10th, there was a rumor that COVID-19 spike was happening due to the fact that those people who showed up for this military parade did not wear any masks, and therefore, once again, we have to question North Korea's claim that no COVID-19 cases in North Korea today. Okay. Another recent incident involving South Korea has to do with North Korean military shot South Korean fishery government official on September 22nd. And they also set on fire on the dead body of this South Korean official who was overboard from the ship he was on, and somehow he drifted into the North Korean side, crossing northern limit line. And this slide showed where that incident happened. One interesting development after that incident was that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made the official announcement apologizing for this incident. as far as I remember, no North Korean leader ever offered an apology for any incidents they caused thus far. So it was a very interesting new development, although it was after the tragic incident, but hearing an apology from Kim Jong-un himself was a very new and interesting development. One very important observation we have to consider is the fact that no nuclear testing done by North Korea since September 2017. President Donald Trump may claim it's because of his negotiation with Kim Jong-un at the U.S.-North Korean summit last 3 times. In any case, although North Korea has launched some short-range missiles since then, but no nuclear testing over last 3 years. Another very surprising incident that happened this year was that North Korea blew up the South-North Liaison Office in Kaesong. Kaesong has been designated as industrial zone where South Korean business groups established their manufacturing firms and utilizing North Korean workers. And they had this liaison office building there, although this industrial park was closed for 3 years. But we did not expect that they will blow up this building, which indicated that the agreement on this economic and industrial enterprise zone between North and South expired, and they don't see any need keeping that building, liaison office building, where South Korean representatives used to be stationed. Another interesting incident which happened about a year ago was the soccer match between North and South Korea in Pyongyang as a part of the World Cup qualifying round. In that soccer match, which has been labeled with the 3 no's match, no fans were allowed to witness or watch that match in the stadium, and no media was allowed either, and no goals were scored. The match ended 0-0 tie. So this suggested that North Korea did not wish to take that risk of North Korean national football team losing to South Korean national team in front of large North Korean spectators. So that's what they have decided. And this is one picture from that match of North-South national football team. And South Korean players reported that North Korean players were very aggressive and they were committing very nasty fouls. And it was a very harsh and aggressive match, and they were afraid of some serious injuries, so they had to kind of protect themselves during the entire soccer match. As we all know, North Korea has established this dynasty of Kim family, starting with Kim Il-sung, then succeeded by his son, Kim Jong-il, and then now grandson of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un, has been in power for the last 9-10 years, since 2011. One of the primary political philosophy North Korea has adopted is Juche ideology. Juche means self-determination or self-reliance. Another interesting component of North Korean political system is that although Kim Jong-un is in power and he's a current North Korean political leader, Kim Jong-un is following the injunctions of the Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, his father and his grandfather. And that include the injunction from his father and grandfather include this nuclear programs and missile development and development of weapons for mass destruction. And that has been the legacy of the Kim dynasty for the sake of the regime maintenance or survival. Throughout the North Korean dynasty, particularly under Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, military first policy was utilized. All the priorities was given to military forces for supply to the decision making of the national defense and security, and military had power in the political system of North Korea. One interesting development since Kim Jong-un came to power is the fact that military first approach has been somewhat weakened, and in its place, perhaps the power of the North Korean Workers' Party got enhanced. That's what we have been able to observe from the development in North Korean politics thus far. One interesting aspect of North Korean class or social stratification structure is the fact that they have this back to bloodline, and they are the ones who participated in the independence struggle against the Japanese colonial control of Korean Peninsula. So they were the comrades of the Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung. And they were the original members of the guerrilla movement led by Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung. And that generation passed away, but their descendants occupy key critical military and political positions even today. So this political elite positions are inherited from first generation of Kim dynasty to the second and even third. It is essential to review the history of North Korean nuclear programs, which started in the 60s with the help of the nuclear scientists and engineers from Russia back then. Then they gradually got on the building reactors, nuclear reactors, and it got into the uranium fabrication programs and conversion of nuclear energy for possible use for developing of weapon systems. And they left the IAEA non-proliferation agreement in 1993, and ever since they concentrated on developing this nuclear weapon system, and they went through 6 different testing with increasing magnitude of the power of the nuclear testing as we detected by the intelligence communities over the years. So last nuclear testing, as I indicated earlier, happened in September 2017, about 3 years ago. Although they stopped the nuclear testing program, North Korea continued to launch intercontinental and middle-range missiles over the years, and they claim their intercontinental ballistic missiles has the capacity of reaching east coast of United States. and the pundits question whether North Korea has developed a nuclear warhead which could be attached to this ICBM. That capability may not be there at this point in time. That's the opinion of the intelligence communities on North Korea. I would like to also share some observations on recent development in South Korea and how it may impact inter-Korean relations. Obviously, South Korea has this COVID-19 as one of the most immediate and serious political agenda they have to handle. South Korea has established a very solid reputation for effectively controlling the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. However, there was a resurgence of the confirmed cases of coronavirus in recent weeks. South Korea had less than 100 confirmed cases per day for last 4 or 5 months, but over last 4 or 5 weeks, 400 or more new confirmed cases been reported, and some deaths from this coronavirus pandemic increasing in recent days, and it used to be less than 400, now 526. However, total number of confirmed cases as of yesterday was 34,600. And all the pharmaceutical companies in Korea are developing this vaccine system, and Korean government is trying to get the supply from major international pharmaceutical companies for the vaccines when they become available. And they claim that they have a pretty solid contract with these international pharmaceutical companies for the supply of the vaccines. The reputation South Korea has established for controlling coronavirus effectively came from their very strict policy on social distancing, closing commercial establishments, schools, as well as effective testing system and contact tracing. Another contributing factor I would add is the fact that Korea went through a very tragic experience of SARS, sudden acute respiratory syndrome several years ago, as well as Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. And the South Korean public health system had experience of dealing with this spread of the previous infectious virus. And from that experience, they set up public health care system, which became very handy in controlling coronavirus. With the effective control of coronavirus, President Moon Jae-in and his party, Democratic Party, he had a landslide victory in National Assembly election, April of this year. So they gained 57 more seats than the number of seats they had before April 2020 National Assembly election. Also, I guess the opposition party failed to come up with any new viable campaign promises to the South Korean voters. They needed to give an impression of fresh policies after the impeachment of their party head, President Park Geun-hye, but they did not deliver any new, fresh directions in terms of policy proposals. So they suffered huge loss in this April 2020 National Assembly election. It is interesting to note that although President Moon enjoyed a fantastic approval rating from Korean people until very recently, then the approval rating started to dip quite substantially. The most recent poll, which was conducted November 30th, just 3 days ago, showed that the percentage of Koreans disapprove President Moon's handling of national affairs was greater than the positive rating. Something like 52% negative, 43% or 44% positive rating. And this came from some mishandling of the key cabinet appointment and the conflict between the justice minister and top prosecutor general, who was handpicked by President Moon, and many Koreans expected that this prosecutor general Yoon Sung-yeol would clean up the political corruption in Korea. However, this top prosecutor General Yoon has been investigating some of the wrongdoings by high-ranking government officials of President Moon's administration. So that led to the conflict between justice minister and this top prosecutor. And public opinion was on the side of this prosecutor general, not supporting President Moon and his justice minister. Another background factor which contributed to the decline of approval rating of President Moon was this rapid increase in housing values in large cities. Now it's spreading to provincial towns as well. So many young Koreans became hopeless in terms of finding a place to live, and that led to delaying their marriages and all sorts of negative consequences correlated to this rising housing price, and that led to the downfall of popularity of President Moon and his administration. Another factor that has been attributed to the declining approval rating of President Moon is his economic policy, which was based on the idea that income-led growth strategy, which will be based on raising minimum wage, will do the job for revitalizing Korean economy. But that policy got backfired in that nearly 30% of a drastic increase in minimum wage within very short period of time, in 2 years, hurt many medium-sized and small-sized businesses. In light of the fact that Korea has a huge segment of the total workforce in the category of self-employed, about 25%, to compare with the 10% or for Japan and 6.3% for US. This sudden increase in minimum wage hurt these self-employed workers because or small businesses, because they were not able to afford hire any extra help, because this increase in minimum wage is greater than what they can afford to pay the extra help they needed. So many small restaurants and corner shops decided to just to close altogether, and the Korean economy was a serious challenge because of this policy. But President Moon decided to stick to this income-led growth strategy, and that became one of the major grievance of Korean people. Another contributing factor to the decline of President Moon and his administration's approval rating is the fact that President Moon has recruited this 586 cohort. They are the political activists who were involved in the movement for democratization in 1980s. So this 586 cohort means they are in their 50s in terms of age, and they were in college in 1980s, and they were born in 1960s. So they were politically sensitized through this democratization movement in 1980s, and they formulated very progressive liberal political ideology, and many of them were student movement leaders, and they had this very sympathetic perspective toward the North Korean regimes, and they became the political elites in Moon Jae-in administration, and they started to push their progressive policies toward North Korea, and that orientation did not work out smoothly, and Korean public manifested their disappointment and disagreement with this 586 cohorts proposals on inter-Korean relations. This Moon Jae-in presidency promised from the very beginning of his administration equal opportunity and fair process and just outcome or just results. It's a beautiful phrases representing his promises to Korean people who supported him, and he got elected as president. However, the image of this Moon Jae-in administration got tainted due to the fact that many of these liberal, progressive political elites in President Moon administration turned out to be not that much different from the political elites in the previous administration. President Park Geun-hye's administration, President Park was impeached due to the political meddling scandal. And these 586 generation of politicians are doing a very similar stuff. So that was another reason behind the declining popularity of President Moon and his administration. I'm sharing all this recent development in both North and South Korea to correlate that these domestic political development have had significant impact on inter-Korean relations and policies toward China, as well as Washington and Japan. So domestic political climate has been one of the key variable determining the inter-Korean policies. Since I'm running out of time, let me just briefly comment on South Korea-US relations and possible changes in American policy toward North Korea. President Donald Trump asked South Korea to raise its contribution for supporting the cost involved in having US troops in South Korea from a little bit less than $1 billion for 2019 to nearly 5 times greater amount for 2020, $4.7 billion. South Korean government has declined that proposal from President Trump thus far, and they have been having a series of meetings, and now President Trump failed to get reelected. So this negotiation may be continued under new President Joe Biden down the road. So that was one of the huge issues which has been influencing South Korea-US relations in recent years. Another factor I would like to comment on is that Moon Jae-in administration has been pushing to reopen this sightseeing program at Diamond Mountain in North Korea, as well as reopening up Kaesong Industrial Park. However, Washington has disagreed with that proposal from President Moon, and they indicated that opening this industrial park in Kaesong and the sightseeing program to North Korea by South Korean citizens would be direct violation of United Nations sanctions against North Korea. In terms of domestic political climate in United States, which may impact its policies toward North Korea is that more than 30% of Americans even suggest to consider taking out North Korean nuclear development programs altogether, and very persistently unfavorable opinion on North Korea. So even new Joe Biden administration may have to take into account the public opinion of Americans toward North Korea. Under Trump administration, as we have witnessed, there were summit meetings 3 times. The first meeting in Singapore, and second meeting in Hanoi, then third meeting, impromptu meeting at the demilitarized zone in Korea. But there was a lot of shows, but no substance came out of this North and U.S. summit meetings. Before that, President Moon and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met 4 times, and Moon Jae-in visited Pyongyang, North Korea. However, these summit meetings, once again, did not bring any tangible results, just like U.S. North summit meetings. Now, I like this political cartoon, which shows that Moon Jae-in, no, not Moon Jae-in, Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un telling each other that they are a lot more alike than they thought, handling the issues at the summit meetings. So a lot of shows, no substance, and no trust factor involved. And let me make an observation on possible changes in Washington's policy toward North Korea. President Trump should be given the credit for stopping Kim Jong-un the nuclear testing. And however, through this summit meetings between Trump and Kim Jong-un, Trump gave legitimacy to North Korean regime and enhanced Kim Jong-un's stature in international political scene, which may not work in favor of South Korea and American policy toward North Korea. What do we expect from President Biden's administration? President-elect, once he takes the office, must handle this COVID-19 issue. And China, I believe, would be the most important issue President Biden would have to focus on. That means North Korea may not be at the top of the priority list for President Biden's foreign policy agenda. And from what we have witnessed in terms of the announcement of President-elects on cabinet appointments of his new administration, which turned out to be recruiting all the Washington hands, those political elites who served under President Obama and his administration. So it gives us an impression that President Biden's North Korean policy may be quite similar to what President Obama did toward North Korea, so-called strategic patience. But that may not be a viable policy in light of the development of the last 4 years in North Korea and the U.S.-North Korean relations. Another possibility is that Obama administration had this approach, a carrot and stick. However, in light of the public opinion in United States about North Korea, President-elect may lean toward the more stick approach than carrot. Although President Biden will utilize multilateralism and honor human rights and normative diplomatic agenda being the critical components of his foreign policy in general, including his policy toward North Korea. Okay, that's what I expect from the early report on Joe Biden's appointment of his cabinet members and some of the reports we have been hearing from Washington on possible foreign policy of this new administration in United States. Okay, thank you very much, and that's about all I have to say, but I would be happy to answer questions and hear your comments and observations. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Shin, for that very interesting, very timely lecture. So we have a couple of questions, actually. Well, a lot of questions here. So are you ready? Okay, let's proceed to the first question. What will be the implication of the ROK if the ROK have decided to pursue its own nuclear program to deter the threat from DPRK? Should I repeat?
Would you say it again?
Okay. So what do you
Dene?
think? What do you think will be the implication if South Korea decided to pursue its own nuclear program to deter the threat from North Korea?
Okay, that's a very important issue to be addressed to. In fact, a substantial proportion of South Koreans had that notion historically, particularly under President Park in the 1960s and 70s, after realizing that North Korea has been engaged in nuclear weapon development, President Park decided to recruit nuclear scientists from United States and elsewhere, particularly Korean American scientists who are specialized in nuclear engineering. However, Washington pressured President Park to stop that program, and President Park had to give up. And occasionally, this issue been debated in political forum in South Korea, but with the current arrangement with Washington, South Korea would not be in position to develop its own nuclear weapon system. So South Korean hands are tied, and many South Koreans do not wish to get into that kind of tic-tac-toe kind of direction. They prefer to have a peaceful resolution between two Koreas, leading eventually to reunification of Korean Peninsula. So my response to that possibility is that although it has been entertained, but it's not doable, pragmatic, and with this current arrangement between Seoul and Washington, it's not possible at all. That would be my response to that question.
That's true. Also, given that South Korea, I think, is a party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty and a party to IAEA bilateral relations, they wouldn't be allowed, or it would be really hard to develop their own power program.
Right. And as long as the United States have a sizable military troops stationed in Korea, and they have this cutting-edge defense system and weapon system in general, Korea may not feel the immediate need for getting into new weapon development program of its own. So, as I indicated earlier, the current condition is not the ideal for any new policies for national defense and security programs based on weapon system or military power-related, strength-related policies that is not going to be very popular. Even many Korean citizens at this point in time. So the mood of Korea has changed quite a bit from the very conservative administration in the 60s, 70s, even up until 1990s. This new administration, Moon Jae-in as a president and his young liberal progressive cabinet members and political elite and party leaders push this very progressive political philosophy toward North Korea, trying to have a peaceful resolution between two Koreas and avoid any more confrontation between North and South. So that has been accepted by large segment of Korean population, and it will be difficult to reverse that trend, which has been developing over the last 4 years under President Moon. That's my observation.
Okay. All right. In relation to the U.S. and with the new administration, what do you think are the impacts of a Biden Korea policy on other major players in the region like China? So will it be or not be beneficial to Korea?
That's very important issue. I'm glad that you raised that point. I have a bunch of slides which I did not get into about South Korea and China relations. To make a long story short, I would say this. Korea is caught in the middle between Washington and Beijing. In that, Washington is pressuring South Korea to be on their side. On the other hand, China became #1 trading partner for South Korea. And South Korea cannot ignore Beijing's wish and request. So they are trying to keep some kind of balance in handling the conflict between Washington and Beijing. And you may recall the incident of THAAD, deployment of THAAD. That's the high altitude area defense system, which the U.S. military decided to deploy in South Korea. That was done under President Park Geun-hye administration. That THAAD system was deployed to detect and defend against North Korean missile attack. But it has a very sophisticated radar system, which may do the surveillance of northeastern part of China. So Beijing hit the ceiling, and they asked the South Korean government to refuse the deployment of THAAD. But President Park decided to go ahead and accept the American proposal of placing this system in South Korea. Since then, Beijing restricted tourism of Chinese citizens coming to South Korea. They, stopped importing K films and stopped inviting K-pop idol groups to perform in China. So the trade relations between China and South Korea suffered due to this deployment of THAAD system. But gradually, Beijing reduced this boycott of South Korean performers and films and music, and now some Chinese tourists are visiting South Korea. And although the COVID-19 pandemic stopped essentially any tourists visiting Korea or Koreans visiting China. So China was expected to play critical role in persuading North Korea to stop this nuclear programs and comply to the international community's demand. But they did not do the job expected from international community, including the United Nations. So it's a doubtful, it's a questionable that China will play any aggressive role in persuading North Korea down the road. They would like to have North Korea as a bargaining chip in dealing with United States, and perhaps as a buffer zone between South Korea and China. So China will play their own card at the maximum extent for their own national interests. That would be my conjecture.
Okay. So with the Chinese, playing to their interests and the change in U.S. administration, do you think there will be a revival, or can we expect a revival of the multilateral talks similar to the six-party talks, or would there be a revival of the six-party talks?
Revival of
the six-party talks.
Oh, I see. That's a very good question, outstanding question, I would say. In light of the fact that the Democratic Party of the United States historically employed this multilateralism and always engage in dialogue with other allies before making a final policy decision with regard to foreign policy directions. So I think Biden administration will develop this six-party similar multilateral dialogue system, including reviving, as you mentioned, six-party talks we had under Obama administration. However, we should realize this fact. That is, President Trump did a lot of one-on-one summit meetings, and he exploited that kind of showmanship. So American public may expect more direct dialogue with North Korea, although this time around they would insist Biden administration come up with tangible results from this dialogue, not just a bunch of shows for domestic political consumption. So in one hand, it's possible to have a multilateral dialogue system, including six-party or even four-party, that is, two Koreas, China, and United States, leaving out Japan and Russia, or some other forms of multilateral dialogues would be on President Biden's agenda toward North Korea. But it may be too early to tell at this point, I would say. Okay, that's my response to your question. Okay.
Okay, so it seems that the North Korea's nuclear program is one of the most pressing issues and one of the biggest obstacle towards achieving unification. So do you think, are there any positive developments on the possible reunification of the two Koreas in light of the recent speech of President Moon Jae-in in the United Nations General Assembly to pursue the Korean reunification plan into 2045?
Okay, that's a very important issue. And in my prepared PowerPoint slide, I, in my discussion portion of my talk, I would have mentioned or raised this question: will North Korea ever give up nuclear program? What will it take for them to give it up? My short answer to that question would be they will not give up nuclear program. As long as North Korea keeps its nuclear weapon system, the peaceful resolution of this confrontation between North and South, I believe, would not happen. Only alternative would be some kind of peaceful coexistence. Okay. And over the years, pundits developed one nation, two systems kind of idea. But that has not been that popular proposal for South Koreans. However, I recognize the need of some stages involved moving toward the eventual unification of two Koreas. One of the stages before we reach that point of unification would be, as I said, one nation, two different political systems, and peaceful coexistence, and all sorts of non-political dialogue and exchange programs, and opening of the economic and cultural relationship, which lead to confidence building and trust will come along the way, and then leading to the unification stage. And one huge blocking factor would be, as I mentioned earlier, this nuclear program, a nuclear weapon system, and the possibility that North Korea will never give that up is the factor that will prevent any new development in inter-Korean relations. That's my point.
Okay. Do you think that it is possible for Korean unification to proceed without the intervention of foreign partners and with only bilateral relations between North and South Korea alone? So do you think that will be more effective if the bilateral relations or the personal interaction between the two countries would be more effective, or with the foreign countries involved?
Okay, that's again a very important question. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Ideally, or theoretically, the unification should be in the hands of two Koreas, self-determination by Koreans to become one country, one people. That's just on theory. And that is not practical and pragmatic in light of the fact that, as I mentioned at the outset of my talk in preamble, Korea is still a shrimp among whales. Although it may not be a small shrimp, it may be a big fish, but not big enough to deal with these giant whales in the ocean. So in one form or another, the foreign superpowers may have to be participants in this process of unification. Different superpowers, United States and China included, have their own national interest on Korean Peninsula. So how these different interests of China and United States would be negotiated with the interest of two Koreas. It must happen, and it will take a long and hard process, I expect. So to be on pragmatic side, that self-determination of unification issue by two Koreas by bilateral dialogue will not be doable at this point in time.
Okay. So I understand that we have a very limited time, and there are actually more questions coming in. So unfortunately, due to this short amount of time, we'll proceed to our last question. But don't worry, Professor Shin's presentation will be made available to everyone for their reference. And this recording will be available also and will be uploaded to the Asian Center website. So for the last question, so how does South Korea view the Indo-Pacific concept? And what do you think are the challenges and opportunities for South Korea with regard to the RCEP agreement or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement?
That's a very good question. And South Korea has decided to join that the partnership. And as I indicated earlier, China is a number one trading partner for South Korea. And South Korean foreign policy, I expect, will be based on national interest of its own, particularly what's in it for South Korea in terms of economic benefits coming from this international partnership. So South Korea will be quite active in that economic partnership with the neighboring countries in the region. On the other hand, South Korea has been reluctant to join the economic partnership initiated by United States at this point in time. So the impression I get from President Moon's policy is that they are pivoting to East Asia or Southeast Asian partnership than looking toward Washington for the economic partnership and future international relations with the neighboring countries in Asia. So that is the impression I'm getting from President Moon's decision in recent weeks. Being active member of this regional economic partnership in Asian neighboring countries and stay away from the initiative proposed by Washington on Pacific region, the trade partnership. Okay. We already have a free trade agreement with the United States. So South Korea may not feel any immediate need joining the initiative by Washington at this point.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Shin, for that wonderful lecture and for answering all our questions. And I'll send you all their questions, and you'll see the volume of them. Okay. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And even though it's already 3 a.m. there where you are, you're still with us. So to officially close our webinar and to formally close the celebration of the 65th anniversary of the Asian Center, I would like to let us welcome the Dean of the Asian Center, Professor Dr. Jofe B. Santarita.
Thank you, Danae. A very good morning to Prof. Shin. I know it's about 4 o'clock in the morning now, where you are, and I thank you for accepting our invitation despite this unholy hour. Pleasant afternoon to 122 friends and colleagues. If you notice then, as mentioned by Danae, 3 days ago, the Asian Center has officially turned 65. So in the human timeline, this is the period of retirement. However, for the Asian Center, it is the time for retire, which is putting again the tire for another purpose. So this means that the Asian Center will open another chapter in its development for the postgraduate degree granting unit that focuses on Asia as it progresses towards its centenary 35 years from now, and with intense plan of performing our mandate to bring the reality of Asia to the Philippines and the Philippines to Asia. So as part of our activities to celebrate another milestone of the center, we are devoting this day to perform again our mandate by bringing Korea to the Philippines. So this afternoon's activity is one of the two parts of our Korea Day. So I'm delighted to hear from our distinguished speaker about his take on recent issues and events that transpired between North and South Korea, such as the North Korea's nuclear weapons program, the summit meetings, and the Trump-Kim meetings. So I'm pleased to hear his views regarding the implication of the Biden election in the US last November and to the relations beginning January of 2021, and also the relations effect to the East Asian region and by extension to the Philippines. So I would like to thank Dr. Michelle Palumbarit, our only resident expert on Korea, and the Asian Center's team, Danae, Jane, and Janus, for facilitating this activity and this afternoon's program. Similarly, I would like to express my appreciation to Prof. Kin Shin for accepting our invitation and for your support to the Center's Korean classes offered by Dr. Palumbarit this semester. No? I think it's the second SEM already, and hoping that we'll have more collaboration in the coming semesters. Thanks also to our reliable partner, the Seoul National University, for being so generous to share to us the expertise of Prof. Shin as our resource speaker. So to our participants, thank you for celebrating with us. Sa muli, magandang hapon at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sandarita. So before we end this webinar, I would like to thank again Professor Shin for being with us this afternoon and this morning where you are. And to all our attendees for this afternoon, thank you very much for actively participating and actively asking questions. And I would also like to thank all of the speakers that have been with us for the past month as we were celebrating the Asian Center's 65th anniversary, and to all the attendees that have also been with us since the start of this pandemic and who has been supporting our activities and events through this online platform, even though it's so tiring to be here online. So if you want to interact more with Professor Shin, he actually teaches classes at the Asian Center because we have classes such as the Culture and Society of Korea and the Politics and Governance classes in Korea, wherein professors from other universities actually teaches in the classes of at the Asian Center. So if you'd like to be with them and learn from them some more, enroll at the Asian Center for our Masters in Asian Studies and Masters in Philippine Studies programs and our doctoral programs at the Asian Center. So if you want more updates regarding our events, activities, available materials, classes on Asian Studies and Philippine Studies, please visit our website, www.ac.upd.edu.ph. And if you would like to receive personal emails regarding these updates, please join our mailing list. So also like and subscribe our Facebook and YouTube pages. So just a reminder, all of the recordings during this celebration, including this webinar, will be posted on our website, and Professor Shin's presentation will be made available to everyone. So before we end, maybe we can have the obligatory photo session. Okay?
Okay, I'm going to count. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Hey, hold on. 1, 2, 3. Wait, what's happening? 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Shin, and thank you everyone
Thank
for
you.
listening.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Danae, for outstanding job. You did moderating this question and answer session. And I would like to congratulate the Dean and your colleagues for this great event of 7 years anniversary of Asian Center. And I wish you have a continuing success in the future. Thank you.
Have a nice sleep, Professor.
Good night, sir.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Michelle. Bye, Dean. Bye, Danae.
Bye, sir.